I have quit my job from the end of October. I love my job. I love what we're doing. I don't want to pay tax anymore, because as you pay tax, you're feeding the system. Well, when you go to kindergarten at the age of dot, and when you go to school, we're not being taught how to think, we're being taught how to fit into the mold. Divide and conquer. It's always been divide and conquer, and that's the way to keep people at each other's throat rather than at the system's throat. I don't like fighting. I like building. Who's they? Let's stop talking about they, it's we. I think that women have become very masculine. And, you have one life. And when you're fighting all the time, it makes you nervous, it makes you anxious. Whereas if you build, it gives you hope. And Bitcoin allows me to do that.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Rachel Geyer back to the podcast. Rachel is working for an orange future for her children with Terahash Space and Les Femmes Orange, and is the chair of the Board of Education Bitcoin Energy Association. It's great to have you back, Rachel.
Thank you very much for inviting me back.
So for those people who didn't see our first interview, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to Bitcoin.
My eldest son led me to Bitcoin in 2017, and I will be forever grateful for his tenacity. I must say it took a number of years for it to settle, and he probably wasn't treated always kindly by the family. But roll forward the pandemic, then I had the time to really sit down and study, and I studied harder than I've studied ever, and knew then by 2020 I just have to work for Bitcoin, because I could see that it was the only thing that was going to give my children the kind of future, a sustainable future that I want them to have. And one thing led to the other. I was in the right place, right time. I'm vice president of Terahash. It's a German startup company, and our mission is to bring hash rate to Germany and to Europe. We set up the European Bitcoin Energy Association. Really, at the beginning, it was more to educate the regulators on the benefits of Bitcoin mining. I mean, we see Bitcoin mining as the tool that will help the European Union to achieve its goals of renewable energy. Over time, we're learning that, hey, start with the companies, because the regulators are going to be the last people who understand it. But the companies understand it very quickly. The energy companies understand it very quickly because they have the biggest problem. Also, back in, I think about 22, I co-founded Les Femmes Orange, which means the orange women. Just after noticing how few women there are in the Bitcoin space, and how I just think it is the absolute perfect saving technology for busy women. And I think often women just don't have the time to look into it. And it takes a lot of looking into. We're busy with our children, we're busy with our parents, we're busy with the household, we're busy with careers. We just don't have the time to focus on something like this. And we don't see the necessity. And so, so those are my three main roles, but I still am convinced that my main role is I'm the mother of 4 children, and I have just learnt that, God willing, I will be a grandmother in March. And
Congratulations.
that pleases me more than anything else. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, we spoke a little bit about your kids last time, and that some of them were on the Bitcoin journey and some were not. Has anybody changed their minds?
Oh, that's a good question. So now the son who brought us to Bitcoin is actually living in El Salvador. So he's up sticks, and he's really very settled over there. He's got himself a dog, and he's got himself a van. And so I think he's settled. I don't think he'll be coming back in the foreseeable future. I would say that one of the children who's very involved in the financial world anyway, he's not interested. And 2 of the children, I would say they save something in Bitcoin, but they haven't taken the time or had the time to actually go down the rabbit hole and really understand what it is. But I have learned the painful way: leave it. I wish I'd done it differently from the beginning. And nobody likes a missionary. And I'm learning that really the best way is just to live the life. And when they see that you're actually quite relaxed about what's going on in the world at the moment, that's how they're more likely to listen to what you have to say, if you are the role model for how you're trying to live.
Yeah, I've found the same. I'm not pushing Bitcoin on anybody at the moment. And since we spoke, it seems like things have become more polarized, especially in the US. And I'm not sure if the same is in Europe. Are you seeing more people struggling financially or understanding the problem?
I don't think that they're understanding the problem, but I mean, I was in the UK a couple of weeks ago. There's massive protests going on in the UK at the moment. And they think they're fighting against a certain thing. If people would just realize that everything that we're struggling with are the symptoms of the broken system, but you don't. And that's the way the world has always worked. You want to stir up hatred against a certain group or a certain belief or a religion or whatever it is. Divide and conquer. It's always been divide and conquer. And that's the way to keep people quiet or at each other's throat rather than at the system's throat. I just find it, I don't want to sound arrogant because we don't know what the truth is either. We don't know what the future is either. But we think we do. I just think that if we would focus on what the underlying problems is for society, or a lot of these problems will just melt away. But I'm definitely noticing a difference. So with our energy companies, I mean, we had a stand at the Intersolar, which is the largest renewable energy fair it was in Munich, but it's the largest one in Europe. And we had a big stand with Terahash and we're showing all about Bitcoin mining. And we were inundated at the stand. And when I was talking to the energy companies and I was explaining Bitcoin mining, basically talking about it as a flexible data center, a number of them said that gives me goosebumps. If you are directly addressing a problem that a company or a person has, and in this case, the energy companies, what do they do with all their surplus energy? Because we've got such a lot of build out of renewables in Europe. We come with the solution to the problem. And so they don't need to know anything about Bitcoin. They don't need to know anything about the ideology. They just need to know that you've got this flexible data center, which you can turn on and you can turn off, and you've got no customer who will get annoyed. So, those break through quite well. I've been doing a number of at Bitcoin events, I've been doing side stages focused just on energy, because I think we really need to come with the concrete solutions. There's no point going around Europe and blah, blah, blahing about the money is broken because people aren't feeling it enough. They will feel it. I mean, just myself, just my own example. I bought a small flat in the UK during the pandemic so that I could look after my parents who were getting older. And I did my sums very carefully at the time. And I worked out if I wanted to be there for more than 6 weeks a year, it would actually be cheaper for me to buy a place rather than having a holiday let every time. And then out of the blue this year, the government has doubled the council tax for properties which are your second home. So not only are you never there, so you're not actually using any of the services that the council provides, but they suddenly double it. And just to put it into perspective, just this one tax in the UK is 2 of my monthly salaries. And it's not even my income tax, or it's a small chunk. And so it just makes you see, your property is not your property. If I refuse to pay this tax, they just take the property off me. But it just consolidated my thinking, thank goodness, that I predominantly save in Bitcoin, that nobody can alter the terms and conditions, So a lot of people are feeling that in the UK. Do they actually add the 2 and 2 together? Probably not. But we're just going to notice this squeeze everywhere. I mean, the governments are just desperately grabbing for tax wherever they can find tax. I don't know I don't know if this is confirmed because I just read it on Twitter, but the Labour Party in the UK has either passed a law or is considering to pass a law to give direct contact to the tax office to your bank account so that they can tax your savings. I mean, it's such a slippery slope that we're on, one step at a time, and people are walking blindly into it. And before we know it, they've got full control over every aspect of your life. Who wants to live like that?
Yeah, that's incredible. And as we know, the US seems to be embracing Bitcoin, or at least talking about using it as a strategic reserve. But it's really not going to benefit well, it's not going to benefit the US to use Bitcoin because they take away their power. So they don't really want to embrace Bitcoin.
You mean the people or the
The
governments?
governments.
For the governments, I mean, I had a meeting with the European Commission, and really I just wanted to bash my head through the wall in the end. And it really made me see that I don't know whether they're paid to be ignorant or they are ignorant, or they're paid not to see it. And I was just talking on a purely energy basis here. It's pointless. It's absolutely pointless. And I mean, the reason that I wanted to start up Les Femmes Orange is I'm actually just interested in the people. I'm not even interested. I'm not interested in the companies. I don't need big companies. I just want the people to be okay, the families to be okay. And nobody talks about the families. It's all. I mean, in Germany, we did do a series of Bitcoin in the German Parliament, which hat off to the politician who organised it. And so there were company CEOs talking and all these people talking. Nobody asked a family to go and talk. Nobody asked a mother to go and talk about what life is like. And I think we've just completely lost the plot on this. A nation is made up of people. And let's start with the people. And what I'm loving is Les Femmes Orange is growing quicker than I could ever have dreamed. And I think that women, once they get it, they're incredibly powerful. And I think a lot of women just have that intuition that it just feels right. We know that something's wrong. We know that we're exhausted. I mean, we can't have everything. We can't do everything. And I'm not blaming anyone for this. I think we bought a lot of it on ourselves. And obviously also with the money situation. I mean, when I look at my daughter, she's got a good job and her husband's got a good job, and she will have to go back to work once the baby's born, because they literally cannot afford to have one parent staying at home. It's just sad. I mean, if people choose to go back to work, that's one thing. But if you literally can't afford, and they've got good jobs, and there's nobody who can now be affording. And I just think, where are we headed as a humanity? If we're not bringing up our most precious assets and we're handing it over at a couple of months old for an institution to put in all their institutional values, and we're doomed. We need children. We need our children to be learning to be individuals right from the beginning, to be learning to learn to think. Well, when you go to kindergarten at the age of dot, and when you go to school, you're not being taught how to think. You're being taught how to fit into the mold. So, I think that's sad, but there are the group of people who have understood Bitcoin, who have got Bitcoin, and I know enough of them. Gives me hope that they think in similar ways. They are very family driven. They are very grassroots driven. And this is where I want to put most of my focus. Also, from the energy point of view, I'm far more interested in decentralizing mining. I'd rather encourage farmers to be getting a self-sufficient setup on their farms, that they've got solar on the roof and maybe a bit of wind power, and they often need the heat, and so they just need to have a couple of miners, and you've got a beautiful self-sufficient system. Companies being self-sufficient, and decentralization is the only way, in my opinion, to move forward.
So the answer is the separation of money and state. But what I'm hearing from you is you're approaching it via the people avenue, going to the businesses, that how it can benefit them to, say, mine Bitcoin, or the women and how it can benefit their lives, rather than trying to educate everybody on the separation of money and state.
That puts people's back up, and I think it's just too much for them to comprehend. I mean, I remember, my husband saying to me, well, what's life going to be like? What's life going to be like if I don't know. None of us know. But at the time when you were separating church from state, there wouldn't have been this blueprint put in place to say, okay, we're going to do this, and then it's going to be this, and then it's going to. But I have just faith in humanity that we've managed to solve all the problems up till now, and we will continue to manage solving the problems. And sometimes I think even if Bitcoin fails for whatever reason, I'm so glad I've been on this journey, because it has so opened my eyes to how I wasn't thinking before, how I was just going along with whatever the status quo was. I mean, my thinking on a lot of things has really changed 180 degrees, and I'm so grateful for that. Sometimes it's exhausting because you start questioning everything, but you tend to find out it's good that you've questioned it, because it is all a load of bullshit. A lot of it is a load of bullshit. I mean, I went on a retreat last week to completely switch off. And then when I got back to the airport, the first thing you see on the television is, oh, there's been a Russian drone shot down over Poland. And then you just see how, it is slowly war keeps coming into the news everywhere. So let's just sensitize the people that there's going to be a war coming. What do I know? Do I know it's a Russian drone? I've got no idea. I've got no idea, but I do know I don't want a war. I do know that I did not have 3 sons in order for them to go off and fight something, which I think is an absolute waste of time. And it's just made me more sensitive to all these things. And I've made a decision for myself. I don't like fighting. I like building, and I will just opt out. I have actually, I have quit my job from the end of October. I love my job. I love what we're doing. I don't want to pay tax anymore, because as you pay tax, you're feeding the system. And when you keep feeding the system can keep evolving. So I just don't want to do that anymore. And Bitcoin allows me to do that. So I want to live my life. I love living in Europe. I want to continue living in Europe. I want to build the kind of Europe that I want to live in, that I think it's a nice place for my children to live in. But if you don't take away your energy from the existing system, it will continue to limp along. Yeah.
So I think that's amazing. Well, that is what I am headed towards too, because as you know, Jeff Booth says, focus on the world you want to live in. And it is actually a challenge, because I think I told you before, I've been a little bit concerned about Bitcoin lately with the Knots versus Core and the mining disagreements. I don't want to see the Bitcoin community fighting. But at the same time, from what I've experienced in the Bitcoin community, it's a much better world than we have in the fiat world. So the more time we move into the Bitcoin world, we're making that stronger.
Yeah. I had breakfast together with Jeff Booth at the Helsinki conference that I've just been at. It was wonderful. And he did the most incredible talk, about who's they. Let's stop talking about they, it's we. And I think that's really powerful. Let's just take the energy away from the whole lot. Don't moan about it. Build the world that you want to do. And with, the thing that's really exciting me at the moment, and which I'm also focusing quite a bit of my energy on now, is Nostr. I don't know if you're aware of Nostr. It's, they're building up this whole, it's more than a communication protocol, but at the moment it's being used as a communication protocol. I mean, I think in the end it's going to be Internet 2.0, and it's decentralized and it's peer-to-peer. And so this whole world is being built up. So actually I'm going to El Salvador in November, and we're running a stand there for Les Femmes Orange and for Nostr, because we have to have free speech. We have to have free speech. We have to be able to say what we're thinking out in public without repercussions that you're having at the moment. So I just find all of this extremely exciting. We will win. We will build this world.
Yeah.
And the more we live it, and we're serene living in this world and enjoy, you have one life. And when you're fighting all the time, it makes you nervous, it makes you anxious. Whereas if you build, it gives you hope. So let's focus on what's going on. And I think, the discussions that are going on in Bitcoin at the moment, it's a good thing. It would be wonderful if they would stick to the actual facts of, I would like to see that rather than the character defamation that goes on. But, I think it's a lot of who's the cleverest here. And it makes it quite hard for somebody who's non-technical like myself to understand what the issue is here. But hey, at least there's a debate going on, and these guys are incredible guys. I mean, Adam Back was also in Helsinki, as was Luke Dasher. So the ones who were at each other's throat, they were all there. Thank goodness that they're putting their incredible brains to it. And this is the way the system works. They'll keep fighting it out until the longest chain wins. And then it shows it's up to us. We do need to stay abreast of what's going on as far as we can, and we do need to keep ourselves informed about what the issue is. The more people that run their own nodes, the better, so that it's not just a few guys deciding, but all of us can decide.
Hey there! Don't forget to like and subscribe to help me grow the channel. Want to sleep easy? MICROSEED lets you stamp your seed phrase onto a small steel washer. Buy the device once and use it forever. I love it. It's discreet, precise, and easy to transport. Get yours below. For peace of mind with collaborative custody, the Bitcoin Advisor is a trusted team who can also help with inheritance planning. Just scan the QR code or use the link below. And check out these super cool SATOSHOEs with over 40 styles to choose from, plus 10% off with my link below. Now, back to the show. Yeah, I love that you mentioned Nostr. That is our decentralized way. And I keep thinking I need to spend more time on Nostr because obviously on X, there's more people, so there's more engagement. But that's also part of moving time over to Bitcoin because you can get zapped in Bitcoin. Its natural payment is Bitcoin.
It's fun. It's really fun, and I think you have a bit of a honeymoon period when you start because you get zapped a lot when at the beginning, and I've noticed that's dropped off. And one thing I've really noticed on Nostr is you don't spend hours scrolling, but what you get is very valuable. And I don't want to spend hours scrolling on social media. So I think it's just valuable. You follow the people who you want to follow. You don't get ads coming at you. You don't get all this engagement that's going on from other, that they're doing it on purpose just to keep you scrolling that bit longer. And I think we'll all benefit if we spend less time on social media, but you still want to keep informed of stuff. So we've taken the whole of Les Femmes Orange over onto Nostr. Of course, we don't want to over challenge people. If they're coming new to Bitcoin, you've got to take things one step at a time. But my experience is the women are loving it.
Very cool.
They're loving, and they're the communication people, and I'm noticing that, at the beginning with Nostr, it was very, 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 very Bitcoin focused. It's building quite a spiritual element at the moment, and that's something that interests me. The spiritual side, that kind of well-being, long-term thinking nature, all of that's growing on there. And I think that those two ideas, Bitcoin and sustainability and long-term thinking and spirituality, they go hand in hand. So it's becoming an ever more beautiful place to be on.
Oh, I love that. And how are you moving from Telegram to Nostr, and how would you find, some of the women who are more into the things that you're into?
So we're actually very blessed to have a woman she actually works with me as well at TerraHash, and she's joined Les Femmes Orange, and she came to Bitcoin through Nostr. So she first discovered Nostr during the pandemic when she was being cancelled for some of her views on normal social media. So she came to Nostr, and that's very unusual, to come that way around. So she's actually taken over running all that aspect for Les Femmes Orange, and she's set it up so that it all gets linked. So if you join the group, you join all of the women on the group. So there's things that you can do. I mean, I'm not I can use it for myself, but I don't know all the ins and outs, and it's growing all the time. The thing is, the more we use it, the more the developers are encouraged to improve on the services that are offered. So, it's like using your modem back in the day to get onto the internet. Didn't sometimes work. It was a bit, but if we stop using it, it will never get better. And the more we use it, the quicker it gets better. So you have to cut it a little bit of slack. We do still have our Telegram groups, but what it means is that should anything ever happen to Telegram, and that's a realistic possibility that something can happen to Telegram, as we've seen, at least we've already got the escape route so that people then can quickly go on to Nostr. But it will be a more gradual thing. Because we do try to appeal to newbies with Les Femmes Orange, and I think that they don't like to be rushed. If you're rushed, you think you can't manage it. So don't put people under pressure. let them take the time that they need to go one step at a time. And then you have a much more successful journey, particularly with the women, to get them in. And then once they understand why it's necessary, they can do all the technical stuff. That's not the problem. They have to see why it's necessary first and why they need to spend the time on it.
Tell us a little bit more about how you approach the women, slightly different to how we approach the men.
Just by being authentic and real. I don't have to be the cleverest dick in the room. I just have to tell about why have I come to Bitcoin? Why has it been good for me? I'm a stinky normal person with a stinky normal family and all the rest of it. And I think that's quite encouraging for the people to say, well, if she can do it, then I can do it. And I think that women like to understand, why is it necessary for me? Why is it necessary for my family? Why is it necessary for society? And after that, you'll get onto the technical side of it. Whereas men tend to come into things from the technical side. They want to understand the technical side of it.
And the number go up.
And very much the number go up. And the majority of women I know, they don't give a monkeys about the number. Honestly, I've got a Les Femmes Orange weekend this weekend, and they are special. We go to a hotel in Germany where you can pay with Bitcoin. There's no program. And we just have an absolutely wonderful time. Everybody will bring something to the table. Somebody will do a yoga session. Someone will do a Qigong session. Somebody will do a talk on Nostr. Somebody will do a talk on a Bitcoin wallet, but all off the cuff, We just talk. We go for walks. We do yoga. We feel good because, a lot of the women, you're knackered by the weekend and you really don't want to go and sit in some smelly hall and listen to one lecture after another. It's bam, 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 bam. It's too much. But have a nice conversation gently with a cup of coffee and with some people that you can see they've been in the game longer than you, and they might show you something that, oh, that's useful. And then someone else might show you something else, so that's useful. And I can ask as many questions and I don't feel stupid because there's not 10,000 people sitting in the room. Small is beautiful.
Yeah.
So Les Femmes Orange has regular, now I think we're up to about 30, 40 meetups, and it's spread away from Germany. Now we're in Helsinki, in Istanbul, in Canada. They're quite, Bulgaria, they're being quite active. And I just think that these small meetups are the way to go. So people feel comfortable, the women feel comfortable, and they basically sit, chat, have friends, have a glass of wine or whatever they want to drink. And it's all very relaxed.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And I'm going to put links to how they can find these groups.
Cool.
Yeah. But I'd like to hear a little bit more on your reset and the spiritual side of Bitcoin or the philosophical side. Do you find that you've been thinking more about that lately, and also the women think about that?
Tons. Absolutely tons. And, to me, I think we've lost our way as a humanity. And I think that, and this is just my thesis, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that women have become very masculine. And really, when you think back to the evolution, the man was very much the arrow heading forward, searching. He was the hunter going out, and the woman was the one who was providing the nurturing base and maybe containing. But now we've got the women also charging forward. And nobody is stopping anyone and saying, is this really what humanity needs? And is this really what humanity wants? And I think things are moving at such an incredibly fast pace. I know I can't keep up. My brain sometimes just goes, for goodness sake, I've just got used to this. Can we please stay on this? And I think that when you think about it, what do humans need to be content? And it's very little. It's very little. And the most important thing is healthy relationships. The research shows that it's more important than the food you eat and the exercise you do. People will die more of loneliness. You're more prone to dying of loneliness than you are to dying of the other things that you would think, if you smoke this many a day or you drink that much alcohol. But it's loneliness which is the killer. And we're becoming incredibly lonely. We've lost connection to each other. And I think this is to a large extent because the women aren't playing that, but the women aren't the homemakers anymore. They're not the society builders anymore. And And I think that we've created men to be how men are today, because men are desperately needing the femininity. And I don't mean feminism, I mean the femininity in order for them to be in their masculine. So if you're not in your feminine, your man can't be in his masculine. And so I think that's just something, and I don't want to put everyone in their boxes, because you're going to have, everybody's on the spectrum. It's not that the woman has to be doing this and the man has to be doing that. But my experience is when you have this group of women and you really start talking about it and you get into the feminine, they're so much happier. And you see their features getting softer, that everything gets softer, because the world out there is very harsh. And if you want to be successful at your work, you have to behave like a man. That doesn't do us good. And it doesn't do the men good. So nobody's a winner. So my argument always was, what feminism should have been arguing for was that feminine traits are as important as masculine traits. And they should be valued in the same way that masculine traits are valued. So that was my grudge with it. I believe I've done such valuable things for society, bringing up these 4 children and really taking a quarter of a century to do it. But what money do I have to show for that? Nothing. And yet you'll have somebody who's, in my opinion, not done such useful things for society, maybe in the financial world with all of these complicated financial tools, which are making the poor poor and the rich richer. And they're left with a shed load of value, but they haven't done good things for society. And so this is where I'm just hoping that Bitcoin, once the money becomes valuable again, we will really stop and think, what does humanity need and society need to be a healthy, sustainable society? And we need the feminine and we need the masculine, and they need to be equally valued.
So does that mean that women should get paid for being mothers?
I don't think there should be about. I mean, who's that from? Because I'm completely coming away from there should be any kind of tax system that you should force. You should force Bill to give something to Paul. But I think it will be a natural, if we let things be natural, if we really have this level playing field. I think what will happen in the future is that, when a man and woman gets together and they want to have a child, they will have to have a good discussion about it. Well, how's it going to work? Who's going to stay at home and who's going to play what role, and financially, how's that going to work? So if you're earning the Satoshis out at work, then I need to have some of those Satoshis because so I think it will be a contract between the man and the woman. There'll be no should, but I'd be a bit of a stupid woman if I am prepared to dedicate all of my time and energy to bringing up offspring that the male doesn't appreciate what I'm doing and see the need of it. So I think we're just going to be becoming a lot more reliant on ourselves, reliant on our partners, reliant on our families. I mean, my husband was very supportive without a shadow of a doubt. In fact, I always did the finances at home. I was in charge of the finances. He was the one who went and earned it. I did all the finances at home, and I still do. So I'm not arguing from that point of view, but I'm probably one of the lucky ones, and it shouldn't be down to that. When I look at what my pension is, it's a joke. My pension is a joke. I know I'm not going to get it anyway. No one's going to get their pension anyway. Or if you do get it, it's not going to be able to buy you more than 2 bread rolls. But in my opinion, that's just not the kind of society I want to live in. That society values somebody who will dump their children in a kindergarten and go off and shovel bits of paper around on a desk and think that that's more important. That's not what I want to live in. But everybody should do what they want. Everybody should live the life they want, but don't take money away from me to pay for somebody else. I'm very social. I will help people who need help, but I want to choose.
Yeah, I love that. And I try not to use the word should. I used to work with a financial planner who was a woman and very much valued the role of the woman and always said women should get paid for their role as a mother. She wasn't not a Bitcoiner, but that was 20 years ago. And I see it comes across in that you're with a man who appreciates the role you're bringing to the family because you are giving up your career in this case to raise the children sometimes.
Yeah. But Paula, let's look at that. Let's look at that. how have we moved as a species to having a career? You have a life, and obviously you need to provide for your life. We all need to eat and we all need to have a roof over your head. But where did we get it so out of balance that we consider it normal to go and sit in an office for a lot of people under some horrible lighting for 8, 9, 10 hours of a day, the best hours of the day when you should be out and enjoying the sunshine? I think this whole career thing has been sold to us as something that you want to achieve. And I mean, my dad he's 91 and he's dying at the moment. And when I go and sit and talk with my dad and I talk about life with him and whatever, the only thing he talks about is his family, because it's all that matters in the end. And yet, we make it that, oh, you've got to have a career. No, you don't. I think it's wonderful to have what's that word in English?
Like a
Like a
purpose.
calling,
Yeah.
that you're doing something, I'm not dissing but a career, to think that I've got to go out and earn money and I've got to work my way up this ladder and I've got to become more and more important. I mean, this is something that really gets me, Paula. So I've got all these titles, I've got these fancy titles, and I get invited on all of these stages. Nobody ever, ever invited me on a stage because I was bringing up 4 children. I can tell you that work was far harder than anything that I'm doing. So we're so impressed by these fiat titles, president, vice president, whatever. It doesn't mean anything. Show me how you are as a person. Show me how you treat other people. Show me how you treat your family, your wife, your husband, your children, your neighbors. That's how I'll judge you. Not whether you've got these fancy titles and you've got a fat bank account, because that doesn't say anything about your character. But we've become a species who you are instantly measured on what you do and not who you are.
And is that because of fiat money? Because, for example, most families have to work 2 jobs to survive in this fiat world because inflation is cutting so much into, like you mentioned, with your daughter and her husband. And that is part of the problem. Everything is downstream of money.
What comes first? The centralization causes it. The weaker that you make the family unit, the stronger that you make the institutions. I think and that goes in hand with the money situation. You can only have these big, powerful institutions if they have the access to the money to sustain them. So yeah, I mean, once you take the access away to unlimited money, then I believe that all these institutions will naturally shrink, which will be a good thing. I've got no idea what a future society will look like, but I do believe that we need to get back to taking more responsibility for ourselves and those around us. I mean, we've become a nation of non-feeling people. You'll step over people in the street. I mean, if you go to the big cities, which I try and avoid because I hate them, I live in a village, and you see, especially around the central stations, you just see zombies, human zombies, and we ignore that. And you don't ignore that in a village. You do not step over somebody in a village. So this, and then also in a town, you think, oh, well, I'll just ring, there'll be some kind of social services that I'll ring and they'll go and sort the problem out, rather than knocking on the door and saying, can I help you? Or can I take your child? Or can I cook you a lunch? Or doing something which then builds up this feeling of community. We don't have community anymore because we get so much money taking off us so that the state will provide the things that the neighbours should be providing and the families should be providing. So I think this is what's led it. It sounds like it's going to be a good thing. Oh, well, the state will take over and they'll provide this, that, and the other. No, people need to be providing that for other people. And that's how you build networks and that's how you build society. And I think women get this. But we're so busy and out at work and not seeing what's going on, and no time to stop and think about it.
Yeah. Unless we're saving in Bitcoin. Like, I just took a trip to visit my best friend in Mexico. And we were saying over there, well, she was saying, I shouldn't have done this. I was thinking, should I do this because I'm losing out on making money? And from my Bitcoin experience, I've learned that time is our most valuable resource. Spending time with the people you love and care about, you can't get that back. And I even said what you mentioned on our deathbed, we're not going to be talking about we should have worked more.
We don't need much Bitcoin. We literally don't need much Bitcoin. I mean, just look at the charts where it said, 12 years ago, you needed 660 Bitcoin for an average house, and then it went down to 60, and now we're down to 6. Yeah. It's just mathematics. We will not need many Satoshis. They're going to go a very long way. Obviously, it's going to take a while, but it's going quickly. I think that it's very easy to, when you're caught in the moment and you see the price doing this, you get caught up in it. It's going quickly. Just look 4 years ago when you got for where you are today and chill. And I think also the longer you are in Bitcoin, you realize you don't need much stuff. If I often go into the forest, I go and work in the forest. I take my rug, I take a flask of tea, and I'll spend the morning working in the forest. I never used to do that. What does that cost me? It's a flask of tea.
And you're in nature.
And you're in nature and you come back feeling nourished.
So tell us about your recent reset. What changed for you?
I think what it was I've been extremely fortunate in my life because I worked for 3 years at universities before we started this amazing journey moving around the world and having the children. And so I actually wasn't really in the fiat world. And now I work for a Bitcoin company, but we're still a company that's following all the German rules and regulations. And it kills me. It absolutely kills me. And I realize I just can't be an employee, even though I love what we're doing. But you still have to fill out your forms and you still have to do your tax and you still have to do this, that, and the other. And I think that over time, I'm seeing more of, one example, we're setting up our second mine in Finland. And our mining equipment has been caught in the German customs now for over a month with some ridiculous reasons that it didn't have the instruction manual in Finnish and German and, all these which nobody cares about because they're all going to this one guy who's going to set them all up and he knows what he's doing, And so the bureaucrats just put so many stones in your path. Here is Germany going down the swan. And you think that they'd be pleased that you've got this startup company. No. And everything is just made difficult for you. And I don't want to work in this world. So I spend a lot of time going abroad talking at conferences. I have to fill out forms for the EU to say that I am not permanently living in that country. I'm only going to go for who sits and looks at that flipping form? It takes my time. It takes somebody else's time. My tax has to go and pay that one. You think, just stop it. Just leave us all alone to get on. Let's stick to the 10 commandments. Don't murder anyone. Don't steal anything. Let's just be sensible about stuff. But we don't need to have rules about every last little bit and pieces. And so I think that's what's really made me think, I love what I do, but I think there's still a better way of doing it. And I want to work peer to peer and I want to work value to value. So if I'm good at doing this, I would bring my pot of honey to somebody who can give me a yoga lesson. And okay, maybe occasionally you exchange Satoshis for it, but that's the kind of society I want to live in. I don't want great big companies.
So you're talking more about living on the Bitcoin standard.
I do it as much as I can, and I will be then from. And I thank goodness for Strike, because Strike, I can get my Bitcoin onto my bank account in 10 seconds. So if I do have a bill to pay and I have to pay it in euro, I can do it very quickly. So it means that you really don't have to have any euros or very, very little euros or Bitcoin or dollars or whatever it is. And the more you're in this circle, the more you meet people who go, oh yeah, I'll do that for Bitcoin. And so I will go out of my way to find, so like my yoga teacher, I send Satoshis every time I do yoga, and everything that I like doing, I'll find somebody who is prepared to do that for me in Satoshis. So little bit by little bit, I can live on a Bitcoin standard, and I don't sell my Bitcoin. I use my Bitcoin for the most beautiful things that I want to do. I think that's a very good use of my Bitcoin. In fact, the reason that I'm persuaded him, he didn't know anything about it. And I just said, can I pay you in energy money? And he said, well, what's energy money? I said, well, it's Bitcoin, but I prefer to think of it as energy money because that's what it is. And I think that's a lovely notion. And I think that fits in very well with the thought of yoga. It's all about, everything's about energy. And what do they bring to the table with their energy? And what do I bring to the table with my energy? I can't give the yoga lessons. So my energy I bring to the table has been mined using energy. It's my SATOSHEES.
I love that. Energy, money, and I don't sell my Bitcoin, I use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very positive. So what is your message to Bitcoiners and women at the moment? You have very powerful messages and you've talked about them throughout, but what would be your message as of late?
The same it always is and always was: study Bitcoin. It's just study Bitcoin. I don't want to tell you you have to buy it. I don't know. What do I know? I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. I don't know what's going to happen next week. I don't know what's going to happen next month. But for myself, I feel much more. I know that my euros are going to lose value. And I know that the noose is getting tighter around my neck for freedom in wherever you are in the world. It's not just Europe, but Europe's not doing well. I know it. I feel it. And so I'm opting for what gives me the hope of financial freedom and communication freedom. I don't know what the future is going to bring, but I think people who say, oh no, you've got to diversify. Well, you're keeping one foot in both camps and you're feeding that old system that you want to get rid of. I don't want to feed it, but if you want to feed it, that's absolutely fine. I'm not telling you what you should do. I just know that I don't want to feed it anymore, and I won't.
And you feel better living this way, and it obviously relaxes you and you're happy.
I am, as long as I don't don't watch the news and don't watch all of that stuff, because when I start watching it, I honestly feel this little knot in here. And then I think, if I don't watch it, it doesn't make any difference to me whatsoever. And it's not that I'm not bothered about people. I'm very bothered about people. But what can I control? And I can only control how I behave to other people. And that's how I think is the best way to teach people anyway. Not tell other people how to be, but how do I treat other people? And then maybe some of that rubs off. And I happen to have, I've actually, everything happens for a reason. And I've fallen madly in love with a farmer, but a regenerative farmer who was a pioneer of his time. So he started 30 years ago when everyone was laughing at him. And so I think that's the next move, is to go and live on the farm. And we want to set up a retreat for people who feel burned out by fiat, and who need to get back to nature, and who need to get their hands in the soil and plant a seed. I think there's going to be quite a need for that.
And he's a Bitcoiner, so that's wonderful.
I met him through work. I wouldn't call him a Bitcoiner because farmers think differently. Farmers save in land and they think, but they're Bitcoiner by value. And so what actually gets him is the energy side of it. So he says this is perfect for farmers because I can produce my electricity on the roof. I can produce the heat I need through the Bitcoin mining, and I'm my own bank. And when he goes around and talks to farmers like this, they listen. When I used to talk to farmers, they don't listen because I don't speak their language. He speaks their language, and farmers are very solution oriented. So they're not interested in putting, I don't know, if they had a spare 50,000 euros, they're not going to go and buy Bitcoin, but they'll produce it. They like the thought of producing things because that's what they do. So he's definitely got the same values as me, because he thinks long term and he thinks sustainably. He loves his children. He wants the best future for his children. So do I. It's all about values in the end. It's not who's a Bitcoiner, who's not a Bitcoiner. It's how do you want to live? How do you want to treat your fellow human being?
And we all need a place to live. And that's a way to be sustainable in the food you produce, and you're sustainable in your self-sovereign in your money. It sounds like a very good partnership. And also, I'm sure he'll learn much more about Bitcoin from you.
I think you will. And then when he was explaining, I didn't know what regeneration farming was. And when he explained it to me, he was saying, if you do not have a healthy soil, it's all about the microbiome in the soil. And if you don't have a healthy soil, it doesn't matter how much organic you do on the top, it makes no difference. And for me, I just said, well, that's Bitcoin. Because if you don't have a healthy money, you don't have a healthy society. So we're all, the foundation is what's important. For him, it's the soil for growing his crops. And for me, it's the money so that I have a healthy society. You have to have strong, healthy foundations if you want to have a strong, healthy society. And that's what Bitcoin does for us.
And that is so true. And we're not even going to get into that, but I've been involved in holistic health my whole life, and it all does start with the soil. And that's why fiat food has degraded so much, because we have not looked after the soil. A whole nother issue, but
a whole other issue. And when you start getting into that, what the government subsidies have done to destroy farming, subsidies destroy everything that they say they want to help. Farmers have literally become slaves. If they do not follow, there's been a massive craze 20 years ago in Germany for biogas plants. So all the farmers were encouraged to, and it was all heavily subsidized. And of course, when you heavily subsidize it, all that happens is the manufacturers put their price up. And then the farmers were told what they had to plant in order to feed into this biogas. So they want the gas. So they weren't even using the animal waste or what they could have done. They were then planting fields and fields of maize in order to feed into the biogas, which sent the price of rent for fields up through the roof. So that your normal farmer who didn't have, and so it just changed the playing field. And so a lot of farmers went out of business, and the ones who had the biogas, not that they were economically viable, but they were just very heavily subsidized. And then you find the small farmer going out of business, and more farms are being bought up on an industrial scale. And that's not good for anybody. That's not good for the animals. That's not good for the consumer. And it's certainly not good for the farmers.
well, I'm so glad that there are still farmers fighting for the right way. And I really appreciate you talking with me today, Rachel. Tell us where people can find you.
So my companies, that's terahash.space and ebea.work. Les Femmes Orange has got a website, and on that website, it's got a link to all the Telegram groups. We've got a German one and an English one. I'm on Nostr, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on Twitter under Rachel Geyer.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.